Well, good morning to you all. Having sat through that fascinating presentation from Dr. Depp, two words come to mind for me: job security. I'm pleased to say I'm not your average male now. I'm 2 inches taller, and thankfully, thanks to me being on a gluten-free regime, I'm now 15 pounds lighter than the average male. So that's good. Anyway, I just want to tell you that, and many of you know this, I'm not exactly your local Southern California dude. Jurors always ask me the same 2 questions. It's kind of scary after a trial what they're thinking about during my closing argument, but the 2 questions they always ask me is, number 1, Mr. Greenwood, has anyone ever told you that you look like? That's good, you're laughing, that's right, you're okay. And the second question they ask me is, how come somebody from England ends up in San Diego prosecuting crimes against senior citizens? That's a good question. So very briefly, a history lesson. Summer of '69, it all changed for me. I was 17 at the time, growing up in a southern county of England called Sussex. So I'm 61 now. But 17 is a very pivotal age for a teenager. And I went to the local cinema. That's what we do when we're 17. And I watched a film which changed my life. Does anybody remember that film? Oh, it was a great film, great film. And you have to understand, growing up in a very small claustrophobic island with 55 million other people in a tight space, and you suddenly go and see this film, because up to that point my impression of America had been based on Dick Van Dyke, Rin Tin Tin and Lassie. And suddenly, this introduced me to another side of America I didn't know existed. And it was wide open spaces, motorcycles, and a soundtrack from Steppenwolf that was telling me I was born to be what? Wild. Thank you! Okay. Whenever I say that to elderly Presbyterians, they go, free! No, no. Wrong movie. And then I went and watched this film 6 weeks later, and that did it. So as a result of that, the next year, summer of 1970, what did I do as an 18-year-old? I climbed aboard a Super DC-8, which is a stretched tin can, and I flew across the Atlantic, and I found my way across to Port Authority bus station and climbed aboard a Greyhound bus, because that's what Dustin Hoffman did. And I found it was an incredible experience. For 3 months, I traveled around America on a Greyhound bus. $99 for 99 days. I can really recommend it. It was fascinating. As a result, I fell in love with America, and every summer after 1970, during my law school vacations, I would come back to teach what I call soccer, what you call football. Summer of '73. At the end of the summer in Illinois, I started traveling again for 3 weeks, and I came to a place called San Diego for 2 whole days, a Saturday and a Sunday in late August of 1973. And on the Sunday morning, I went to a church in University City. It was a Baptist church. I walked in, it was a young adult Sunday school program. I looked around the room, only empty seat was sitting next to a gorgeous young lady. Sat down next to her, married her. So, that's why I'm here today. Okay, so you didn't know you were going to get a family slideshow. Well, you are. Okay, so here's my wonderful wife, Sue. We've been married for almost 35 years. She's the love of my life. And she's from San Diego. She gave me 13 years in England, and then she said, darling, I love you, but I can't stand your weather. My weather? And so anyway, so she begged me to bring her back to sunny San Diego, so I did. And she blessed me with 2 wonderful children, Rebecca, who's 33, go figure, she married a Brit, and it's interesting because they're both in social work in London, and last year our daughter gave us new titles. Yeah, our daughter didn't do anything by halves. Oh, no, no. But, you know, life sometimes has just an amazing twist to it, because my wife and I, we lost our second born at 3 weeks. And it's always been a hole in our lives. But you know what? We've been blessed with twins now. And there's been no history of twins in our family. So it's just amazing how life comes around like that. Have you ever known a grandfather to show you just one picture? No, of course not. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so what are their names? This is the 21st century, India and Eden. Why India? Because our daughter and son-in-law spent 6 months, 3 years ago in southern India studying human trafficking. And our daughter worked with young girls as young as 10 who'd been rescued from street prostitution. And so a part of her heart was left behind in India. And then I asked her, what about Eden? She says, Dad, there's so much evil in this world. We wanted to be reminded of something pure. So there we go. Okay, just a couple more, you know, just, you know, okay. And then, okay. This is a girl, I love this one. Okay. The difference between England and America. Okay. Okay, just a couple more. Don't get like that. Okay, and then finally, goodbye. Okay, all right. Off they go. Okay, and there's our son Stephen, who's into films, documentaries, and he just went to Google to film all about their Google Glass that we'll all be wearing in 3 years' time. Scary. And if you want to know about the personality of my son, this is it. You know, he's 27, and I really have a lot of hope for the future because I see my son's generation. I'm fascinated by them. Energy, fearlessness, creativity, imagination. The world is at their beck and call. I mean, it's just amazing. People ask me all the time, how come you're so passionate about this subject? 2 reasons, my mother and my father. And I always show this to young law school male students. This is how you dress on your first date. This was taken about 5 years ago. My mother likes to always remind me, because she knows I speak in American, she says, now Paul, remember, tell your audience in America that this was taken in our back garden. And then she pauses and she says, remember, a yard is a measurement. Just remember that. 2 words describe my mother. She's turning 90 next month. Margaret Thatcher. Does that give you an idea of my mother? Toughest lady I've ever known in my life. Tougher than Margaret Thatcher, if you can believe that. And one of the reasons? Because my mother survived days and nights of bombing through the Blitz in London as a teenager. And that gives you a certain kind of steel that has always been with her. My mother was an English high school teacher for 39 years, missed 3 days of school in 39 years. She refused to let me or my sister, and certainly her, to be ill. I could not miss 1 day of school in all my years. And then there's my dad, who's 90 already, and sadly my dad has advanced Alzheimer's. And it was a painful decision for my mother, but last February, a year ago or so, she placed my father into this wonderful facility half a mile up the road from where they live. So I've learned a lot about the disease of Alzheimer's in the last 3 or 4 years. Sadly now my father cannot recognize us. He cannot speak anymore and he cannot eat solid food. But he can still serenade his wife of 65 years every Sunday by playing the piano, Red Roses for a Blue Lady. Isn't it interesting? Still knows how to play the piano, even though he has lost the ability to speak and chew. There he is, my dad, my hero when I was 7. Why did he become my hero? Because I found out that my dad was a B-25 bomber pilot in World War II and went up for 79 brave, courageous bombing missions. And I know it's not politically correct to talk about war, but this is how I grew up. This is my generation, my parents' generation. And these are the folks that I see every single day in America and in this county being taken advantage of, and that's why I'm so passionate about it. When I leave here this morning, I'm heading back to the office. I've just had an email. We have a purported alleged rape of an 81-year-old female coming into the office as a 3rd day in custody this morning. That's what we'll be dealing with today. 81 years of age, allegedly being raped in Poway. So I work as a prosecutor in our DA's office. I'm so proud of our office. I've been there for 20 years. Do you know what the county gives you after 20 years service? Not a lot, but anyway, it doesn't matter. So I'm one of these career prosecutors. I don't want to do anything else. You know, we've cultivated in our office a spirit of this is what you need to do, this is what you want to do, and this is we'd like you to stay. And they've made it possible for many of us to stay 20, 25, 30 years. So you know this building, this is the Hall of Justice. This is my office is up on the 12th floor. And it's a reminder every single day coming to work, this is what I'm involved in. Seeking justice for the men and women of that generation. But isn't it interesting, they built this beautiful courthouse 10 years ago. It is gorgeous, and there's some beautiful courtrooms. And we were so excited. But you know what? They said, sorry, only the civil litigators get to be in those courtrooms. So where do us prosecutors get put? In the 1960s asbestos-filled courthouse next door, which they threatened to blow up and build again, but I don't know whether they ever will. So we are a large office. We are probably the third largest prosecutor's office in the country. Los Angeles is the biggest, of course. But they're not the best. And so we have 300 prosecutors, so we can specialize. So I work in the Family Protection Division. So we prosecute child abduction, child abuse, domestic violence, and elder abuse. And I've been responsible for leading the elder abuse prosecutions for the last 17 years. But the most important members of our Family Protection Division are these two. We are so proud of this program. It's one of the very few in the country, but we believe in having service animals alongside our vulnerable victims, whether they be child victims or elderly victims. They get to accompany our victims to court, and during the break they just hang out on the bench afterwards. This program has become so successful that we've had volunteers lining up with their animals helping us. It really is a tremendous thing that you should be very proud of. So you know this fella. All the older generation, the World War II generation, they know him. He's 92, Mickey Rooney. And Mickey Rooney has become the unofficial spokesperson for victims of elder abuse because he testified in front of the US Senate a couple of years ago, and his famous phrase is, if it can happen to Mickey Rooney, it can happen to anyone. And it certainly has been a pointer to a lot of victims. The kind of cases I deal with include this one. It's impressive. You can imagine two men in suits and sunglasses, because that's how the FBI can be spotted a mile away, walking up to an elderly widow in Point Loma. They show her the badge. They tell her that her bank account is being infiltrated. They're investigating it, and they need to come into her apartment and talk to her about how to overcome it. So they do. They get in. One of the FBI agents shows her his badge, and he shows her his business card, and they ask her to call the bank because they want to try to find out who's stealing the money, but they don't know who it is in the bank, so they want her to withdraw all her money. And they'll meet her the next morning at the apartment, and they'll mark it, and then they'll go back with her and take the money back in cash to the bank. That night, after they've left, and before they're going to come the next morning, she gets a little concerned. And so she calls this number, but she's satisfied because it says, "Hi, this is Agent Ross Walker. Please leave your name and number." But then she still gets concerned, and so she calls the police department. They come over. And within 10 minutes, they realize this is a fake. These are what crooks are doing today. They are taking on the appearance of law enforcement, convincing elderly widows that they are law enforcement. The great thing is that we acted quickly enough, and when these two guys arrived the next morning, they were shown the real FBI badge, and they were arrested. And then you get cases like this. A Pearl Harbor survivor who was being isolated by his caregiver. Isolation, you've already heard it from Dr. Depp. Isolation is one of the biggest red flags that crooks will do. And this crooked caregiver isolated her victim, and fortunately neighbors called APS. APS called for law enforcement, and a deputy sheriff found the victim. When they found the victim, he was clutching a photograph in the kitchen, on the floor of the ship that he had served on in Pearl Harbor. And this is what she did to isolate people. She put these signs all around. Don't knock, don't disturb, sleeping. That's a red flag. And what was the intent? To steal all his money. That's what they found when they went into her bedroom. And then you got this lady. As many of you know who she is, Sandy. Don't ever let your grandmother buy a Kirby vacuum cleaner, okay? Because Sandy did. She didn't need one. She just liked the young man who sold it to her. She felt sorry for him because he needed to get a trip to Hawaii. And she lived on Mount Helix, and this thug came along and sold it to her. And do you think Kirby does a background check on their salesman? No. 6 weeks later, after selling her an overpriced Kirby vacuum cleaner that she would never use, he knocked on her door at 10 o'clock at night on a Monday evening and said, "Can I come in? I've just broken up with my girlfriend. I need to use your telephone in order to call for my mother." And so she let him in, because that's how Sandy is. She's very welcoming, trusting, And as a result, he duct taped her, he kidnapped her, he threw her in the trunk of her car and kept her prisoner for 26 hours. Fortunately, a deputy sheriff, who now Sandy always refers to as her angel, on a gut feeling followed this car at midnight out of the city limits of El Cajon, and it blew through a red light, which gave him probable cause to make her stop on the vehicle. 3 young people peeled out of the car. In the back seat was a shovel. Now, you know why that shovel was there, because Sandy was going to be buried near Campo. And had that deputy sheriff not intervened, she would have been dead probably within 5 hours, according to the medical experts. So this was incredible. She was in the back of the car, and there she is, bless her heart. Every time she finally bit through the duct tape on her mouth and started crying, help, help, help. And every time she cried help, he would stop the car, lift the trunk lid and go, bam, and punch her in the face. And she was defenseless because all her hands were tied. He even duct taped the back of her head. I guess I should have put this at the beginning. I always forget to put it at the beginning. Bonnie is my boss. She's a great boss to work for, but she gets nervous whenever I speak in public. So please blame me, don't blame my boss, okay? Because I have this habit of saying things that maybe she might cringe. But you know, one thing I've learned over all these years as a prosecutor, the 20 years, unfortunately, there are some cases that just simply get overlooked or ignored or disbelieved. I mean, that case involving Sandy, I didn't have to go looking for that. That arrived, in fact, on my desk because that morning I woke up and I turned on the 6 a.m. news, and there it was on the news, and I knew it would be coming to me. But there are many other cases out there that never would get to my desk. And so I've made it part of my mission for the last 17 years to seek out those cases. And that's unusual for a prosecutor to go looking for business. We don't typically network and go try to find cases. In fact, I don't know of any other prosecutor in my office who does that. You know, we wait for the police to bring the cases in, but in cases of elder abuse, you have to really shake the bushes sometimes and go looking for them and start asking lots of questions, because otherwise they will remain buried. This one didn't remain buried. This is Jack Parks. This is taken on his 98th birthday. Jack I never met in real life. I only met him through death. But Jack was a man I would love to have met in real life. He was married for 74 years to the same woman. I mean, Larry King could probably say he's been married for 74 years, but 7 women, that doesn't count. Jack, one lady. And Jack, I'm sure, would have said he never got tired of being with his spouse. He lost his right hand when he was 21 in an industrial accident. It was amputated. And as a result, he depended on his wife for so many of his domestic chores. They lived together in Mission Gorge in a very modest home. She dies. What happens? Most of my victims who've been married long term, they end up very much at risk of becoming a victim of elder abuse within the first 12 months of losing their life partner. What did he do? He put an ad in the newspaper for a caregiver. Don't ever allow your elderly relatives to put an ad in the paper. Don't let them use Craigslist. Don't let them use the UT for anything, because it is only crooks who look through those ads that want to get hired. And sure enough, Julie Spencer responded to the ad. And what did she do as his caregiver? She started stealing his checks, as many of them do. She's so brazen about it, and wrote out checks to her automobile car loan company to pay off her car loan. But Jack spotted it. There it is at the top of the right-hand corner, forged. Bottom right-hand corner, he added up what she had stolen. He confronted her, and he gave her 2 choices. He said, I'll either have you arrested by calling the police right now, or if you agree, I'll deduct $250 from every paycheck. Of course, she agreed to that. 6 weeks later, what happened? They got into an argument over food. She punched him. He fell to the ground. She kicked him while he was on the ground. She dragged him from the ground, put him in a chair, got a vacuum cleaner, brought it over, wrapped the vacuum cleaner electrical cord around his body, tied to the chair. Goes into the kitchen, grabs the paper towel holder, undoes the paper towel holder, starts rolling up little paper balls and starts setting fire to them. Puts fires all through that mobile home. This is the one end of the paper towel holder right here. And you can see it's melting into the carpet. Meanwhile, she gets a knife, slices his ear, goes through the house, rips out every telephone, and then drives off, leaving him tied to the chair, burning papers, blood coming out of his ear, and he thinks he's going to die. Well, he gets out of the chair eventually, but he's exhausted. He goes and sits down at the computer desk and he writes a note. Only 3 words: arrest Julie Spencer. Because he thinks, when I die, at least they know that. They know who did it to me. But he didn't die. He went and laid on his bed, ear wound. Next morning, comes out, gets into his car, drives down through the mobile home park, slumps over the steering wheel, the weight of his chest on the horn blaring away. Neighbors come running out and they see him and they call for paramedics. Take him to Grossmont. 4 broken bones in his left eye. She had gone right through from front to back of his ear, punched up and down his good arm, kicked him in the ribs, and when they did the x-rays, his 11th left rib was fractured. Now, one thing, 98 years of age, you would expect to have a pre-existing medical condition. Yes, he had COPD, emphysema. And 4 weeks after this photo was taken, when he's in a rehab, he dies at the rehab. What does he die from? Bronchial pneumonia. But the autopsy revealed, and the coroner later explained, that the bronchial pneumonia was caused by the fact that he had a pre-existing condition and he had a broken rib and he was bedridden and he had restricted breathing. Therefore, he does get bronchial pneumonia. And if you're 98 and you get bronchial pneumonia, guess what, members of the jury? You will die. So now it's up to me to explain to the jurors that but for the actions of Julie Spencer, he would still be alive today. She is responsible for his death. She is guilty of second-degree murder, and she was convicted by the jury and then sentenced to 17 years to life, 15 years to life for the second-degree murder, plus 2 consecutive years for stealing his money. I borrow this slide from Illinois because there's so much silence out there about the crime of elder abuse. And most of the silence, as we all know, comes from the victims. Sometimes because the victims do not appreciate that they're victims. If somebody this morning were to slide a piece of paper in front of my father in that facility and say, Mr. Greenwood, sign this, he would, because that's his nature. He's very compliant. And he would have no clue that he's a victim. And there are other victims, as you know, who are too embarrassed to come forward or too afraid to come forward. So what is elder abuse? 17 years ago, I had no clue. I didn't look for this assignment. I was given it. And I was brought into the office, and I remember the conversation. It was very short. Greenwood, you're going to prosecute elder abuse. And I said, excuse me, what is it? And they said, well, actually, we don't know either. But we've heard from Adult Protective Services it's a problem, which we want you to go find and go prosecute. And it's unusual for a prosecutor to be designated into a particular type of crime for 17 years. But the reason is I have fallen into an area that I find fascinating, challenging, frustrating, and escalating. And I don't want to do anything else for the rest of my career. And it is escalating because of what Dr. Depp told us this morning. And one statistic I will give you, by the year 2030 in this country there will be over 70 million people driving Buicks. I'm sorry to stereotype my victims, but 95% of all my elders drive a Buick. 2% drive a Toyota Camry. Another 2% drive a 1993 Cadillac de Seville, white exterior, tan interior. And 1% drive a Dodge Magnum with 20-inch rims, and that is my victim of the Kirby vacuum cleaner, Sandy. And guess what? And Dr. Depp also referred to this, we're all living longer. Many of you in this room will live to be 100. And I don't know whether you've thought about that. I'm 61. I have no intention of retiring. I can't afford to anyway. I've got twins to look after, right? So I'm hoping to go on for another 10 years, which gives me 29 more years to play golf, fish, and drive an RV. That's plenty of time, right? So, but if you need any proof that we are living longer, just turn on NBC any weekday morning, and you will know that if you eat Smuckers for breakfast, you will live to be 100. But my favorite centenarian is this lady. I'm not endorsing it, but it's a true picture. So it's exploding. This whole concept, as Dr. Depp so rightly said, it's exploding. And many of the reasons are because of demographics, because of dementia, Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, no cure. The fact that victims are staying silent. The fact that we are appropriately keeping, as far as we can, our elderly population in their own homes. But here's the other downside to it. Who's taking care of them? Well, in San Diego, I can tell you who a lot of them are: convicted felons. Because we still don't have a law yet in California requiring all caregivers to go through a mandatory background check, which is crazy as far as I'm concerned. There's one place in the whole of the state of California that has done something about it. It's called the city of Napa. If you want to be a caregiver within the city limits of Napa, you have to go through a mandated background check as part of a city ordinance. Where did Napa get the idea from? Guess where? San Diego. We created it, but they borrowed it, and they did something about it. We couldn't because of lack of funding. It's very sad, because how many thousands, millions of dollars is it costing our county to prosecute convicted felon caregivers? I wonder if the legislature ever thinks about things like that. So, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. I just like that photo. I took it. But we've got to understand, to get to the end of the tunnel, we've got to understand what we're battling against, which is fears of seniors that leads to this underreporting. You know, that statistic that Dr. Depp gave us, 1 in 5 cases of elder abuse is reported. I have to challenge that statistic, because this is the problem with statistics. 1 in 5 is reported. How do we know about the other 4 if they are unreported? Who made that up? That's what I want to know. You know, because if they're unreported, we don't know about them. So why shouldn't it be 1 in 305? The IRS, there we go. Oh, don't get us started on that. So you've got all this going on, and sometimes threats from the perpetrator, so you've got a lack of reporting, self-reporting by the victims. Okay, so in California, what is the definition of an elder under the criminal statute? Anybody who's 65 or older. I'm okay with that, for now. In a couple of years, I'll be less comfortable with that. At least it's better than Illinois, where already I'm a senior citizen. And in North Carolina and other states, where 60 apparently is, that's it, you're done. But there are some benefits. You see, for example, I'm a great believer in public transport. I take the bus every day from Escondido. It's a wonderful system. MTS is brilliant. How much do they charge me? For a month to drive on a bus, a beautiful bus, air-conditioned, reclining seats from Escondido to downtown Courthouse every single day, backwards and forwards for a whole month. How much for a 60-year-old? $25. Wow. Isn't that brilliant? You can't even fill my petrol tank with, for $25. So there are benefits. And Major Market, every Wednesday, I get a 10% discount. And I really got upset the other night because I had forgotten, and I went to buy something. I said, oh, can you take 10% off? He said, I've already done it. Oh, that was horrible. Speaking about numbers, what's the code section? Because you know that police officers never talk in words, they talk in numbers. They never talk about a homicide, they talk about a 187. They never talk about a burglary, they talk about a 459. They never talk about a robbery, they talk about a 211. In fact, the best question you can ask a police officer is, when was the last time you investigated a 211 in a 711 when 911 was called? So this is the number that you want to make sure that police officers remember, 368. 368 covers a lot of ground. It covers, actually, not only people over the age of 65, it covers dependent adults aged 18 through 64. It actually says that in the statute, 18 through 64, who have a physical or a mental disability. And it covers physical abuse, physical neglect. It actually covers emotional abuse too, and it also covers financial abuse and false imprisonment. So it's a very meaty statute, but that's the one that I will use all the time. And it really doesn't give you a definition of physical abuse, but you kind of understand what that means. But the great part of this California statute, which I'm very proud of, is the language is under circumstances likely to cause great bodily injury. Under circumstances likely to cause. So I don't have to prove any injuries in order to get a felony. As long as I can prove that the circumstances were likely to cause. So you've got an 82-year-old lady with a walker. And I had this last week, getting off a bus. She's attacked from behind. She's pushed. Now let's just suppose, unfortunately, she did sustain injuries, but let's just suppose she falls to the ground and grazes her knee with no real abrasions, no sutures needed, nothing. Just a little slight Band-Aid cover-up, that's all. Nevertheless, I can still get that guy convicted of a felony because the circumstances of pushing an 82-year-old lady with a walker off a bus are likely to cause great bodily injury, are they not? So that's the great thing about this. But what I have to also prove is that the defendant knew, or reasonably should have known, that his victim was over the age of 65. So for example, if a burglar goes into a home of an 85-year-old, and there is no evidence that the house is owned or occupied by somebody over the age of 65, I cannot charge elder theft. Do you see what I mean? Because I can't prove that he knew, or reasonably should have known, unless there was a Buick in the driveway. Then I can prove it, okay? So, and I say that because I want to make sure that there's proof out there that we can prove that the defendant had some knowledge, which maybe go to show why this defendant targeted. Sometimes it's dependent adults that get victimized. This is a case I prosecuted recently, the caregiver. My dependent adult was very disabled. She needed help getting in and out of the shower. One day she asks her caregiver to leave her in the shower for half an hour because she was having a bad day. Caregiver not only leaves her in the shower, she goes through the apartment, and the apartment is on the first floor, and steals her jewelry and leaves the apartment. After half an hour, my victim calls out for help. There's no answer. Now imagine, you are in a shower, you cannot get out on your own, and you start calling out for help. Nobody hears you because of the sound of the running water. What does she do? She thinks about it. How do I get help? She actually manages to shake free the gauze at the bottom of the chair and get it to block the drain. She sits in that shower for 7.5 hours. Waiting for the water to fill up over the pan. It spills out over into the floor of the apartment, and it spills through the ceiling down to the ground floor apartment. That's how she got help. So the ground floor tenant sees this damp patch coming through, calls maintenance. Maintenance go upstairs. They have a key to the apartment. That's how they find her and rescue her. That's the stuff that's going on in San Diego. And there's my victim. And our detective did a fabulous job on recovering the jewelry. You can tell by her body language, she's not going to let anybody get hold of that again. So in the last few minutes, I want to very briefly go through some misconceptions and then maybe take a couple of questions. These misconceptions I battle against every single day. Number one, there's a misconception that elderly people make terrible witnesses. That is a fallacy. And you have to take my word for it. After 17 years, I love bringing in elderly witnesses to my courtroom. But there's a problem out there that a lot of law enforcement think they're going to be very ineffective because of these misconceptions. We all know, do you have to be 85 to be forgetful? Of course not. And I find actually that a lot of my elderly victims are very precise. And I think one of the reasons is because look at their day. It's very uncluttered. Look at your day. Look at your weekend schedule. It's very cluttered. We're so busy and we're getting things so confused in our heads. But when you're 85, what do you have to remember? Your medical appointment, your beauty parlor appointment, and what time the Wheel of Fortune is on. It's fine. And the Wheel of Fortune is always on at 7 p.m., so you have to worry about that. So, but these are all stereotypes. Well, I want to show you why I love my job and why I've been doing it for 17 years, because of people like this. These are all victims of my router defendant. Now, this is not the defendant, this is some poor fella I borrowed from the internet, okay? But the real crook was a rota employee. They fired him for dishonesty, but they forgot to ask for the return of his uniform. So one day, he drives over to Mount Miguel Covenant Village over in Spring Valley, wearing his rota uniform and knocks on the door of every single independent apartment. And this is what he says: "Good morning, management has sent me. There's a problem with your plumbing, can I please come in?" So of course they let him in because he said management. So now he says, "Can you go to the rear bathroom and stand by your hot and cold taps?" So the victim goes out of sight while he's in the living area stealing whatever he can, and he steals from all these victims. I get the case from the police. All I have is names and ages. I subpoena them, and here they come at 8:45 on a Monday morning. Look at them. Do I have to run a rap sheet? Do you think so? No, of course not. These are upstanding, wonderful, credible victims, and jurors love them. This last Monday, I had this. Look at them. It's a prosecutor's dream, ladies and gentlemen. 7 victims, they all lived in the same upscale facility in La Jolla. And I'll tell you the name of it because it's public record: Chateau of La Jolla. The maintenance man stole from every single one of these ladies using his key, and each of them had a TV cable problem or a maintenance problem, and he would come in and he would say, "Oh, why don't you go downstairs and have a cup of coffee while I fix it?" And he would steal their jewelry. He had no prior felony convictions. He was about 45 years of age. These ladies were ready to testify at 9 o'clock on Monday morning. And do you know what happened? He pled guilty, and he stipulated to 10 years in state prison because these ladies were going to be powerful, powerful witnesses. That's why I love my job. What about if my elderly victim refuses to provide information? They tell me there's nothing that can be done. For example, you know who did this to her. This was her son, right? Do you think she is really excited to get her subpoena and come to court to testify against her own son? No. But we've learned over the years that we can still prosecute this case effectively. And we mustn't allow this wall of silence to dictate whether or not we can prosecute. I have to be sensitive to the fact that I know that this is a concept that is very, very important to a lot of people, but I have to tell you, as a prosecutor, I do not believe in it. In the sense that some of my elderly victims tell me to my face, "Mr. Greenwood, I don't want you to prosecute my son. And if you prosecute him, I'm not going to help you." I understand that. But does that mean I don't prosecute? No. This is something that really frustrates me. And if you hear about it and you see it, I want you to put a stop to it. If you see this, or you find out that a police officer has abandoned an investigation because, quote, "the victim declines prosecution," that is a fallacy. But this is in police reports that I see week in and week out. We've got to put a stop to this. Because if I don't prosecute this son, what's going to happen in 6 weeks' time? He's going to do it again and again and again. So we've got to make that clear, to not only to our victims, but to our investigators too. What about money? They tell me if my victim gives the money voluntarily, it's not a crime. Well, I've learned over the years that in elder crimes, what appears to be consensual on the surface has in fact been diluted by fraud, undue influence, or by exploiting the mental limitations of the victim. This is a case that I prosecuted a few years ago. Victim, late husband, crook. Victim had Parkinson's, husband dies. Victim decides to sell the house and move into a facility in La Jolla. At the facility, crook is working. Crook has never met my victim's late husband. This photo is a fraud created by the crook. So what does he do? He goes into my victim's room one day, probably when she's at dinner, grabs the husband and wife photo off the mantelpiece, scans it, photoshops himself into it, comes back and approaches my victim with Parkinson's and says, "Look, this is proof that I am your long-lost nephew." And then encourages her and persuades her to move out, purchase a condominium with her money in joint names as joint tenants, which means that he, as the survivor, will inherit this wonderful condo. And when the adult children found out, they go to the police, and the police said, "It's a civil matter." But it's not. What happens if the financial institution reimburses your elderly victim and then the institution isn't interested in prosecution? Doesn't matter. We still need to go after the crook, because it's no good for the institution to say we're not bothered about it. We should be bothered. We've got to go after them. What happens if we discover the theft after the victim is dead? That happens quite a bit. And normally it's an adult child coming back to San Diego, sifting through deceased parents' inventory, finding suspicious transactions. Adult son would call me and say, Mr. Greenwood, I believe my late mother was a victim of theft. Can you help me? And I say, well, you have to make a police report. 24 hours later, he calls me back and says, Mr. Greenwood, I tried that, but it was no good. I said, why? He said, because they explained to me that because my mother's the victim and because she's dead and because it's theft, there's nothing that can be done. So my response is, call back that same officer and ask him, what would happen if I wanted to report a murder? I'm sorry, sir, I need the victim statement. The victim is the victim of murder. I need the victim. How many people do you know that refuse to prosecute a murder because the victim is dead? So I'm not suggesting that every case can be proved when the victim is already dead, but some can. And that's why we should never just sweep all these away. What about home repair? And there's a dispute over money. Is it always a civil matter? And my answer is no, it's not. Because I found over the course of 17 years that there's a lot of crooked contractors out there. 95% of them are unlicensed. There's some great, honest, licensed contractors out there, but there's also some very shady, many of them unlicensed. And they are making a lot of money out of these victims in San Diego. But unfortunately, a lot of these cases end up, quote, being reviewed as civil. This was a victim of mine. He typed it out for me. And you can see in the last line there, I called the police, but they said it was a civil matter. No, it's not a civil matter. And I just find it a little ironic. When we talk about civil and criminal, we are offering what kind of opinion? A legal opinion, right? Who is better qualified to offer a legal opinion? Somebody who's been trained in what? Law. Police officers, bless their hearts, are not trained in law. I am no good at knowing how to arrest somebody. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to preserve the peace. I don't know how to secure a crime scene. I don't know how to diffuse a situation where there's a hostage. That's what police officers are trained to do, is it not? But are we asking police officers out in the field to become lawyers? That's wrong. And so my approach is gather the facts and bring them to someone like me that you are paying as a county lawyer to determine whether or not this is civil or criminal. And this was one of the cases that we prosecuted. I love this one. Okay, here's the crook. He called himself Father and Daughter's Christian Construction Company. Where would you place that poster, that flyer? Church parking lot. And that's what he did at 10:15 on a Sunday morning during the 10 a.m. service up in Escondido. But he didn't place it on the Lincoln Navigator or the Austin Mini Cooper. What did he put it on? Oh, you're good. Yes. And of course he gets victims. They call him up and he comes over. Now you can always tell a crook because they don't know how to spell. So that's what I look for in all my evidence. I always look for spelling mistakes, and there he is. Basic installation. And then lifetime warranty. It's a crook. Nowhere on this does he tell you how much he's charging. He doesn't tell you how much his final price is. He just says, just work with me. So in the morning, he gets my victim to write out a check for $1,324. She thinks that's the final price, so she's happy to do that. He's got 3 workmen there, and they start tearing the stuff down outside. And he goes running off to the bank. That morning, he runs off at 9 a.m. The bank gets suspicious because he's loud, he's brazen. I want the money, give it to me now. And they call my victim. They say, do you really want us to pay him? She says, no, that's fine. They're working here. Give him the money. I fast forward now to 4 p.m. By now, my victim, who's in her 80s, she's a widow, she's beside herself. She realized that they are not only inept, they're probably fraudulent too, but she just wants them to leave. Well, to her horror, William Petrie walks into her kitchen with his workmen. He says, "Get your checkbook out." "But I paid you this morning." "Oh no, that was just for materials. You owe me another $4,200 for labor." She knows now it is fraudulent, but she's trying to be calm, and she's thinking, okay, I better give him the check because otherwise they might beat me up. So she's thinking, when they leave, I'll call the bank, put a stop on the check, and then we'll call the police and have them come and protect me. He gets the check, and William Petrie says, "Stay here," to his colleagues, because he knows that the bank is going to call her. So sure enough, they call her, but this time she's shaking. She hesitates, and then finally she says in a quiet voice, "Pay him." He takes the money. He comes back, picks up his colleagues, and I want you to picture now, and I'll finish with this picture for you. She's sitting there at the kitchen table. There's the phone. Who does she call? And the answer is nobody. Because that is exactly what's happening today. Somewhere in San Diego County, one of your elderly relatives, friend down the street, neighbor, church companion is being ripped off right now, and they will never tell you or me. Why? They're embarrassed. How did we get this case? The bank. The bank did the right thing, and this was before they were mandated reporters. Every single bank teller today is a mandated reporter, but the bank knew that something was up. The bank called Adult Protective Services. Adult Protective Services went over the next morning, and Adult Protective Services cross-reported to law enforcement, who did a fabulous job, and they brought me the case. And when I did the preliminary hearing, she walked in, and the first thing she said was, "Mr. Greenwood, I beg you, don't tell my son." And we never did. But William Petrie is now, and I love this on his flyer, he says, "We will do anything from cleaning a toilet to building a house." Right now, I think the good news is William Petrie right now is cleaning a toilet. Okay, so with that, I'm going to, there's one more thing. I'm going to leave you some brochures. We have got prepared my top 10 tips for personal financial safety for seniors, which I have based upon 17 years of prosecution. And so please take one. I'm going to grab it out of my backpack in a minute, and make sure you take one and circulate them and photocopy them or whatever you do. But we've got 2 minutes left. Any questions? Yes.
I have, listening to you, I have total confidence in your division and your department. What about if you have a concern about an elderly relative in another state and adult protection services? It's fiduciary.
Right.
Of a son, of an aunt of mine. And her daughters are fearful of what this will do and doors will close. But they believe my cousin, their brother, is fiduciarily abusing their mom,
Right.
who he lives with.
Well, actually, one practical thing you can do is, and I'll leave you my business card, email me, tell me which state it is, and I have people in corresponding states. And actually, tell me which state it's in.
Texas.
Okay, yeah, I got lots of contacts down there, so fine. We'll try to get something going for you.
Happening for the last 2-3 years.
Okay, all right, yes.
I thought in regards to those scams that, because I know of a case where somebody was getting letters, "Oh, you sent me money, you'll get another check, I'll come and deliver this check personally to you, send me $3,500, you've won $2 million. I did some follow-up calls, and I was told, well, that he has the right to gamble his money away if he wanted to. But it was obvious that he was being scammed.
You've raised a very interesting question about these telephone scams. You've won $1 million, and the general reaction, unfortunately, is that there's nothing that can be done. Yes, there is something that should be done. Number one, that is a crime, what you've just described. Just because this person has used their own intellect to fall for it doesn't make it any less a crime. They've been duped. They've been fraudulently misrepresented, so it is a crime. The second excuse I'm given is, well, these crooks are overseas. We don't have jurisdiction. Yes, we do have jurisdiction, because the crime occurred here in San Diego when the words came over the telephone. So I do have the ability to prosecute this crook, and I do have the ability to extradite this crook, normally, but I need somebody out there to track them down. So at least if you hear about these kind of scam victims who have actually fallen foul of it, I want to know about them, because there are certain things that I can do or that I would like to do, and I like to keep track of it. The new way of doing these scams now is using green dot prepaid cards. These crooks used to get victims to wire the money through MoneyGram and Western Union. They're not using that anymore. They're asking victims to go to CVS and Walgreens and pick off a green dot prepaid card off the rack, which you load up with $500. And on the back is a metallic strip, just like an iTunes card. You scratch it off and it's 14 digits. The crook phones you back, gets you to tell him the 14 digits, and within 3 minutes, 5 minutes, he's now in possession of that $500. It's so easy, it's very easy not to be tracked for that. So it's 5 to 10. I'll hand back over to you, but there are the brochures that I'll leave to distribute.
We're pausing into a break, so if you want to still have dialogue here, I think feel free to keep, yeah.
Yes?
Is there a time period limit when a crime has happened 5 years ago, 6 years ago, you walk into it, you discover it?
Excellent question. The question was, for the benefit of the video, how long do we have to prosecute these? Is there a statute of limitations? And it is. It is 4 years from the date of the crime in financial cases, or 4 years from the date of discovery of the crime. And in terms of physical abuse or neglect, it is 5 years from the date of the actual incident. So thank you for that very important question. Yes, sir?
Yes, you were talking about internationally, like prosecution. How
Yes.
about if it's an expatriate living, for example, in Mexico, and another expatriate, another American citizen, is abusing this elderly in Mexico?
Then it's a crime that we don't have jurisdiction over that crime. The crime is occurring in Mexico, therefore it has to be reported to the Mexican authorities.
Even though that is to American individuals?
Correct. No, it's the location of where the crime occurred. Yes, yes. Yes, ma'am.
Can anyone do a background check on somebody like, let's say, my mother-in-law wants to hire in-home care, and I said, well, I need to do a background check. Can we just do a background check on anybody?
Good question is, can I do a background check on anybody if I'm considering hiring a caregiver? That's why I always say go through a bonded insured agency and sit down and ask, what have you done to do a background check? And if you don't get proof as to the background check, then go to another agency. There is something you can do in addition, and sometimes I recommend it. It's worth hiring a private investigator, but on a fixed amount. Say $250, I want you to find out everything you can about this individual who's coming into my home. But then again, there's other foolproof methods that you need to take into account. Make sure that maybe you as a trusted family member can receive a copy of the bank statements. Lock up the jewelry at all times, keep an inventory of the jewelry, and these are all things that are in here. Okay. Yes?
Is there any such thing in your office as a case that's too small?
For me, that's a great question. Is there anything in my office that is a case too small? I love that question. I've never been asked that question. And here's my response. No, there isn't. And I tell you why, because unfortunately in this country there are prosecutorial agencies who I think are arrogant. And for them, if they would laugh at me for taking anything under $25,000. But for me, it's not the amount of the loss. It's the conduct of the criminal. And if I don't try to get that criminal's attention, even if no loss has been created, then that person is going to do it again and again and again. I remember in that FBI case that I showed you, I was upset with the judge because the judge was willing to sentence these two guys for a lesser term because no money was lost. And I said, Your Honor, it's immaterial that there was no money that was lost. It's the conduct. It is so manipulative and so calculated because of the business card, the badge and everything. That's what you need to be punishing and not the amount of the monetary loss. Yes, Ron?
Procedurally, is our first call to you or to APS?
No, good question. So the first call, if you suspect, is to APS, 1-800 510 2020. And this afternoon you're going to hear from Annabelle about how you do that and what you should expect to happen, right, Annabelle, afterwards, because this is one of the beauties of San Diego County. We're the 8th largest city in America, but you wouldn't know it by the way we work together. We are a small town feel. We know one another. The DA's office and the APS work hand in hand. City attorney and DA work together. So that the first call is to APS. APS will go out unannounced. If they determine that a case looks like it's got criminal undertones, they will cross-report. But here's the beauty of it. When they cross-report and APS gets the runaround, or they get, oh, it's a civil matter, then I expect APS to email me and say, Greenwood, can you have a word with law enforcement? Because we think that there's more to this, and that's why we can make things happen. Yes?
So, if an elderly person lives with a younger relative, and someone becomes aware that there's physical abuse going on, but when they confront the elderly person, they choose not to press charges. Is there any way to get around that?
Yes, well, you've just highlighted the famous TV phrase, they refuse to press charges. To me, that doesn't exist. Victims do not get to refuse to press charges. The only person who can refuse to file charges is me. So as long as we can get the evidence in, and can we corroborate it even if the victim isn't willing to testify, to say they've been hit by their son? Yes, we can corroborate it through the expert testimony of an ER doctor or an ER nurse. The paramedic may have got some admissions from the victim. The neighbors will have heard the threats made by the son to the mother, and a history with Adult Protective Services. So we can combine it, and we can definitely put together a case. We will not allow a victim to tell us that we're not going to be able to prosecute based upon the victim's wishes. Now, my mother always told me, don't ever stand between your audience and a coffee break. So I'm going to cut it there. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.